guys, welcome back to Elley Knows Rocks. Today I am standing in a beautiful sandstone conglomerate slot canyon, and I am just a little bit north of Alamo Lake. This is an absolute beautiful area. I'm taking the side-by-side out here, and we're going to walk through some of the canyons and shoot some film, or shoot some video through the canyons on GoPro while we're traveling through on the side-by-side. This is absolutely phenomenal. I hope you guys really enjoy it. The history here is absolutely amazing. All of these canyons were cut by water. They are different deposits of sandstone and conglomerate over the years. And the silence in here is absolutely beautiful. Thank you guys so much for being part of my adventure, and let's go see what we can find.
Just look at those big, beautiful mountains over there. We're not actually going into them, but I thought the scenery was gorgeous as we were driving through. Lots of iron are in those hills. So driving through this area around Alamo Lake, there is a ton to see. This was an old iron mine, for instance. They had a mill, a little town here, all kinds of stuff. It overlooked the lake. The roads were mostly sandy. It was a pretty bumpy ride to get here. And by the time we actually did get to this area, we were a little bit low on fuel, so we didn't do as much driving around exploring as I wish that we could have. This was an old town that's out past Alamo Lake. I think it's to the north. This is a friggin' old bus that's out kind of almost in the dunes in a dry part of the Alamo Lake. And it was like a full-on sandstorm. The wind was super picking up, but it looks pretty sweet. Totally Mad Max style. The old dump piles from the iron mine looked pretty cool. The road was so much fun. And because the road was so much fun, on the way back to the car, we actually ended up breaking another belt in the side-by-side and had to replace it on the road. And if we didn't have a spare belt, or if it would have been something else, I would have been walking like 8 miles back to the truck. Not so much fun. But look at this red dirt. Isn't that awesome? Iron mines are pretty cool. So in order to get to these slot canyons going the back way like we decided to go, which we won't go again, we found a different way in. Yeah, you get to see all this stuff. Otherwise, there's a much easier way in on the other side, and you see these beautiful slot canyons. And yes, I drove most of the way there. I was having a ton of fun. Getting into these areas, I was absolutely in awe over what I was seeing. I couldn't believe that this existed away from Antelope Canyon in Arizona. I felt completely blessed. And the area that I had researched or looked up to go see is a little slot canyon off of the main slot canyon called Maggy's Canyon. And so that's where we're headed. Also, I couldn't imagine taking my Jeep in here because some of the turns were so incredibly tight that the side-by-side could barely make it through. This particular area is just loaded with different slot canyons. But the one that we're focusing on today is this little one right here. It curves and winds around and catches the light just beautifully. Now this whole area has slot canyons up, down, right, left, all over the place. But for exploration purposes and the length of this video, we're only going to just focus on a couple, starting with this one. When most people think about canyons in Arizona, they think about the Grand Canyon or Antelope Canyon. Now, the way that those were formed were extremely different from each other. We'll pause for a moment while I'm goofing off. I was having a little bit too much fun. Now, taking the Grand Canyon for instance. The Grand Canyon was formed through the Colorado River cutting the different layers of rock over time with a continuous flow of water, shaping the Grand Canyon to what we know it is today. Slot canyons like this one were formed very differently. They were formed by a sudden influence of rushing water, what we in Arizona like to call flash floods during monsoon. And a flash flood is exactly how it sounds. 1 minute, the ground is dry, but it's raining on the other side of the mountain. The next minute, you see water almost start to percolate through the sand, and then you look up and there is a wall of water coming at you. I've been in 2 different areas where I've seen and witnessed this myself. It is one of the scariest phenomenons I've ever witnessed. Over time, these giant flash floods would bring other rocks and sand with them, cutting these canyons even deeper. Slot canyons aren't known for being very wide. They are known for being narrow and very deep, because with each flash flood, more of the rock is eroded away through time, making it deeper. Since the canyon is already cut and narrow, it's a lot easier for the water to cut the canyon deeper and not wider. Surprisingly, slot canyons can be just slightly dangerous. Say there is just a few droplets of water, you notice that it might start to rain just a little bit, and then all of a sudden, you'll hear a rumble kind of like thunder. Well, there's a very good chance that a wall of water might be rushing at you. Rain builds up extremely fast, especially in these narrow canyons. You could see it wouldn't take very much water at all in a flash flood to get really deep really quickly. There have been quite a few injuries throughout the United States when people have been in slot canyons during a monsoon or other flash flood-like events. Now, some of you may be thinking to yourself that these canyons that I'm in right now don't exactly look like the beautiful canyons that they find in Page, Arizona, with their nice, gorgeous, uniform grained sandstone. The geology here is very different from there. It's kind of like comparing oranges to apples. You can see how parts of this are extremely rough. Well, those parts with the little boulders in them are actually a conglomerate. They're a matrix-supported conglomerate, and the sandstone is the glue. Above and below the conglomerate banding are beautiful bands of sandstone. This represents the different types of flows and arid conditions throughout this part of Arizona over the years that it took for it to form. As you can see, I'm having way too much fun filming Dan as he's filming me with the drone walking through the slot canyon. I've got to say he did a really good job. I think he only hit one blade during this entire little tour following me through. I am extremely lucky that I have somebody that is willing to follow me through a slot canyon while managing to film with the drone and not kill it, beat it up, or any of the above. So thank you, Dan. And this is what Dan looks like as he's concentrating with me filming him. And I believe in my original video I talk about if I have a stalker, meaning the drone, that is, not Dan. Now, some of you might be asking, what do I mean by debris flows, conglomerates, sandstone, and arid conditions? So this whole area where this slot canyon is was very lacustrine at one time. And you can see by the conglomerate and sandstone layers, it had many different events over the years, like a Boomis sequence. And if this is a Boomis sequence type of a unit, some of the units would have been weathered away, but then they would have continued and layer upon layer and event upon event and repeated itself over and over again to make up these really tall walls. So the conglomerate and the debris flow would have formed during a time when there would have been a lot of rocks in the water, deposited very rapidly, but only after they'd been in a fluvial system long enough to be rounded. After that, they were deposited and cemented together. The sandstone, being as fine-grained as it is, would have taken a little bit longer to develop and would have been a more complete system and a more mature system. Mature meaning that a lot of the actual bigger rocks would have either sunk to the bottom or not been in the original deposit, giving the sandstone layer a little bit more time to build up, which creates a more uniform look.
really, really iron-rich red sandstone. And there are different events that are going on inside of here. You've got all kinds of bedding going on here. You have gradational bedding, you have reverse gradational bedding, you have no gradation whatsoever. And then years of just dust, just sandstone building up to create some of those layers. It's absolutely fabulous. Look how pretty those are. So this would be some reverse gradation. You have some the finer class here and the bigger ones are up there. You can even see watermarks to it, or wave marks and ripples. And then you just get it just where it's just deposited. Guys, walking down this awesome slot canyon, there is a beehive. Like, honey beehive. Oh my gosh, that's intense. Especially for someone who's allergic to bees. Don't tell the bees, okay?
Okay, guys, it's not enough that there's one beehive, but there's two beehives. Another honey beehive way up there in that sandstone. It's a little intense. It's kind of scary.
I swear I just got dive bombed by a bee. At least I'm pretty sure. I wigged out pretty bad. I think my boyfriend jumped and screamed about as bad as I did. I think they were just making sure that I stayed away from their little honeycombs and I wasn't gonna do anything wrong. But isn't this beautiful? So incredible. So incredibly pretty.
This right here is a beautiful fault that cut these layers.
These little tiny faulted structures within here are amazing, little micro faults. And each layer of conglomerate and sandstone, they represent different layers in time completely, where they would have had a really heavy fluvial system with a lot of gravel in it that was rounded, that was deposited very fast. That's what this means. There's no gradation to it. It's just all there. So it was really quickly deposited. And then it stayed there for quite a while. And then you have your sandstone cement in there. And then you have a layer of sandstone. This is a greater gap in time than this is, because this would have happened really quickly. This would have happened a little bit more slowly. Less water in the system, more air, more heat, that kind of thing, very arid environment. And then again, back to water, and you're gonna keep going up, and that's what each one of those layers represents.
Now that that portion of the canyon has been explored, we have decided to drive just a little bit further down the way. And going down here, you can see how much wider this part of the canyon is. Now, yes, I know I said earlier that most slot canyons are not very wide. However, the widest parts of the slot canyons means that that was the path of the least resistance for the water. So it would have started working on these wider ones way before it started working on the narrower ones. As we're driving, the geology changes just slightly in the fact that the events that were in the last slot canyon aren't quite as prevalent in these sides of the walls. And yet again, this portion of this canyon, the geology has changed. A lot more sandstone, a lot more fine grain, less gravel layers in this one. And starts out a lot wider than the last one, but goes down to get pretty skinny. You can see there's tracks in here where people tried to take their Jeeps or other vehicles and ended up stopping just because it doesn't go much further. You can kind of see by just how beat up the rocks are, how bad the events would have been that deteriorated a lot of these rocks. I would not want to be caught in this area during a flash flood. No way. And still, the microfaulting is everywhere. It's absolutely fascinating. You get little tiny little canyons, offshoots off to the sides. What a beautiful place to take some photos, right? Well, I have bonus material coming up at the end of the video. And now, before I show you the next feature and how excited I am about it, I'd like to preface it. The feature was not formed during deposition. It was formed after deposition, but while the feature was still ductile enough to be moved. So what happened is it was deposited and then it was pushed and squished to look the way that it does today. Okay, we have a really cool swirl folded feature coming up right here. Look at that. Oh man, that's amazing. And this big guy right here is a beautiful shear zone. That is an exposed daylighting fault face right there, meaning that after deposition and solidification, the ground moved, creating slick marks and streaks on that big feature. Sadly, we've come to the end of our slot canyons, and we're going to start to head out to get back home. And of course, you know me, anytime I see something that looks like mining in the wall, I have definitely got to check it out. This was no different. There's a hole in the wall with a door on it. Of course I have to go see what that is. Yep, pretty cool. This door is definitely an old door to a powder shack where they would have stored the dynamite just in case it exploded. It wouldn't have taken out the mine that was probably nearby. And speaking of mine, look at that, guys. Holy crap. That is quite the entrance, and I believe this is an actual area for a house. I don't know that this is an abandoned mine like they say it was, but let's check it out really quick. Great safety feature here. Totally worked.
GoPro's recording.
I know. Might be fully wrong. Cool, it's fine. Oh, well, I'm standing in bat poop. That's lovely. You can see it goes in there a little ways, but it kind of just stops. But that is pretty amazing. And all this yucky stuff on the ground, bat turds. Oh, wow.
I think it's a house. How would they be mining out of sandstone?
For starters, this isn't sandstone.
Oh.
It's metamorphic rock.
I want to say it was the entrance to a little house. I don't believe that's mining.
Just a house, wasn't it?
I think so.
I hope you thoroughly enjoyed watching this video, and I really hope you learned something from it. Thank you all so much for being part of my adventure, and I hope you come back and join me on the next one. Until then, I'll see you guys later. Oh, and for the super nerds, if you want to hang out after the video, I have something special for y'all. So, nerd footage. Anyways, after exploring this canyon the first time, I had to bring back my favorite photographer, Dave Kelly. He loves to go to different places and is always up for a challenge. And I've dragged his butt out to some pretty extreme places, and so far he hasn't complained. We had a beautiful time while we were here, got a ton of great photos, and were able to go exploring and see some things that I had never seen before. So that part was pretty amazing. But that's for a whole nother story. Thank you, Dave, so much for letting me taking you out to get you absolutely filthy in the desert with dust. Caught in a small rainstorm and hiking everywhere to the point where you were exhausted and being there when our side-by-side broke. So you went through a lot on that weekend. I believe that we carried out several suitcases of dresses with us to find the perfect dress and outfits for these beautiful rocks. I love combining my two passions, especially in an area that has so much geology diversity. I honestly could come back and shoot down every one of these canyons because I believe that each time it would be very different. And it's just so exciting to see. And these are the beautiful results that we got from this photo shoot. I really hope you guys enjoyed a little bit of behind the scenes and sharing with you my other passions.